The day my parents chose a wedding over my child's life began like any other, quiet, desperate, and already half lost. They stood in my doorway, dressed like they'd just come from brunch, while my son was dying in the next room. My father's voice was sharp, final. "We don't have that kind of money lying around, Nora. You need to be realistic." That was the moment I learned what realistic really meant, letting go of hope. Behind me, the oxygen machine hummed, steady and merciless. Leo was 7, asleep beneath thin hospital sheets, chest rising unevenly. The smell of disinfectant clung to everything, the walls, the air, my skin. The bills sat on the table like evidence at a crime scene. $85,000. That was the price of his life. The new treatment could save him. The doctors said so. Conventional medicine had already walked away. My name is Nora, 31, a middle school science teacher in Cincinnati, fighting to keep my world from collapsing under medical debt and exhaustion. Leo's father had left the night of his diagnosis, said he couldn't handle watching his kid fade. So it was just us now, me, my son, and the slow ticking of a machine keeping him alive. My parents lived 20 minutes away, in a suburb where the lawns were as trimmed as their consciences. My younger sister Lily still had her old bedroom there, untouched, preserved like a shrine to easier times. "Realistic?" I repeated, throat tight. "Dad, the doctor said Leo has maybe 6 months, if that." Please, my mother touched his arm the way she always did, to soften his cruelty without ever questioning it. "Honey," she sighed, "we've already helped so much." "We paid for 3 surgeries. We can't just empty our retirement." "I'm not asking you to empty it," I said. "Just lend me enough to keep him alive. I'll pay every cent back." My father shook his head, calm, deliberate. "You're barely keeping your head above water. Be sensible, try a payment plan, medical financing." He didn't understand. I'd tried all of that. The banks had already said no. The only payment plan left was the kind that came with a coffin. "You're my last hope," I whispered. He didn't flinch. "We have to think about our own future, too. We're not getting any younger." They left soon after, their perfume and aftershave lingering long after their compassion had gone. I stood by the window, watching their car glide away beneath the streetlight, and felt something small and final close inside me. Then I turned toward Leo's room, and the sound of the oxygen machine counting down what was left of his time. The next morning, I called my parents again, not to beg, just to remind them that Leo's next treatment cycle started in 10 days. My mother answered on speakerphone. I could hear my father's voice in the background. "Sweetheart," she said, "we went over the budget with the planner last night. Things are tight. We just can't take on anything else right now." "Budget?" I repeated. "For the wedding," she said brightly. "You'd be amazed how fast things add up." I stared at Leo's IV line. "So there's a budget for orchids, but not for oxygen?" "Don't be dramatic, Nora. We all want Leo to get better, but we can't risk our retirement over a treatment that might not work." My father's voice cut in, firm and dismissive. "We've made our decision." A click. The line went dead. That sound, the hollow silence after the call, was louder than anything I'd ever heard. A week later, I saw the photos. Lily's bachelorette trip, a weekend in Napa. White dresses, matching sun hats, champagne flutes engraved with their initials. My mother had posted a photo of the dinner table, crystal glasses, candlelight, and a caption that read, "So proud of our girls. Family is everything." The invoice had been accidentally forwarded to the family group email. $10,000. $10,000. The price of another month with my son. It lands like a punch. I stared at the photo of them smiling, wine glasses raised, while my son lay pale and sweating under hospital lights. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just turned off my phone and sat in the dark until the machines around Leo started to sound like applause. Leo died on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before my sister's wedding. He went quietly, his small hand wrapped around my finger, the oxygen machine humming one last lullaby before it fell silent. The nurse who pronounced him gone wept softly beside me, and I remember thinking she cried harder than my parents ever would. When I called my mother, her first words weren't why or how or oh God. No, they were, oh Nora, no. What terrible timing, terrible timing. Because his funeral would interfere with the rehearsal dinner. That was the exact moment something inside me changed, a click, like a lock sealing shut. The grief was total, swallowing me whole. But beneath the devastation, a new kind of clarity was born. Quiet, steady, and colder than anything I'd ever felt. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. I scheduled Leo's funeral for Friday, 2 days before the wedding. I didn't ask them to move anything, didn't plead for understanding. I already knew what the answer would be, and I couldn't stand to hear it said out loud again. That their celebration mattered more than my son's burial. But I didn't expect them to ask me to move the funeral. On Wednesday evening, my mother called. I was sitting in Leo's room, surrounded by the pieces of his short life, the dinosaur poster he'd loved, the rock collection from our walks, the unopened science kit he never got to use. "Honey," she began, "we need to talk about the funeral arrangements." "What about them?" I asked. "Well, Friday's really difficult for us. We have the wedding rehearsal that afternoon and the dinner that evening. Everything's scheduled, deposits paid. Could you possibly move the funeral to Thursday? Or maybe next week?" For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. "You want me to change my son's funeral," I said slowly, "so it doesn't interfere with your rehearsal dinner?" "It's not just the rehearsal, Nora. It's the whole schedule. We have out-of-town guests. Daniel's family is flying in. Your father has a toast to give. We can't just miss it. We'll still come to honor Leo, of course, but Thursday would work better for everyone." Everyone. The word hollowed itself out inside me. "So it would be more convenient for everyone," I repeated, "if we buried my 8-year-old son a day early, so you don't miss cocktail hour?" "Nora, don't be dramatic," she snapped. "We're trying to support you and Lily both." "Why can't you be more flexible? You know how important this wedding is to your sister." That was it. I hung up. I didn't trust myself to speak. The funeral stayed scheduled for Friday. I paid for it with money I borrowed from my principal, a man who had shown me more kindness in a year than my parents had in my entire life. It was small, quiet, painfully simple. 20 people, my Aunt Margaret, a few teachers, some of Leo's classmates' parents. My parents arrived 45 minutes late. My mother wore a soft pink dress that would look perfect at a rehearsal dinner. My father's tie matched. They stayed through the service, but skipped the small reception afterward. "We really have to go," my mother said, pressing her lips to my cheek in a motion that barely counted as contact. "Lily's having a crisis over the seating chart. But it was a lovely service, Nora. Very tasteful. That's how she described my son's funeral." I watched them leave, their car disappearing down the street, and I felt something freeze inside me. The bills kept coming. $73,000 in medical debt, rent 2 months overdue, and the only thing heavier than the bills was the silence where Leo used to breathe. I thought grief would end when the heart stopped breaking. Turns out it just keeps beating, emptier. Then my phone buzzed. "Wish you were here to share this special day. Lily looks absolutely stunning. Wish I were there." As if I'd simply chosen not to attend. As if I were missing a party because of a scheduling conflict, and not because I'd buried my child 2 days earlier. I put my phone down and walked outside. The air in Cincinnati was sharp, painted in gold and red leaves, the kind Leo had loved to crunch under his boots. We'd planned to go to the pumpkin patch that month, another promise broken by time. By noon, my phone was buzzing again, a relentless stream of messages, photos, and updates from the family wedding group chat. My mother had added me to it. Of course she had. The pictures loaded one by one, the Tuscan villa glowing in golden hour light. Lily in a designer gown that could have funded a full year of Leo's treatment. The 5-tier cake, the champagne tower, the string quartet playing for people who believed they'd earned happiness. $230,000 worth of celebration, while my son's body lay beneath the earth in a cemetery I couldn't afford to mark with a headstone. I scrolled, detached. Everyone looked radiant, faces beaming, champagne glasses raised. My father, proud in his tuxedo. My mother, glowing in her $3,000 Mother of the Bride dress. Cousins who'd sent me thoughts and prayers now dancing under fairy lights, sipping wine that cost more per bottle than they'd ever donated to Leo's campaign. And then I saw it, a photo of my parents dancing, my mother's head thrown back in laughter. The caption, "Best day ever, so blessed." I put the phone down, walked into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, 15 pounds lighter, eyes sunken, skin gray. I looked like someone who'd survived a war, except the battlefield had been a hospital room, and the casualty was my child. That night, sitting in the silence of my studio apartment, I made myself a promise. This wasn't over. They thought they could bury my pain under confetti and champagne, that they could buy their way past guilt, buy their way into peace. They were wrong. It wasn't revenge I wanted. Not yet. It was truth, reckoning, balance. I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Every number, every word, every refusal. The day I asked for help. The day they said no. The day Lily announced her wedding. Every cost. The venue, the flowers, the food, the dress. Who showed up to Leo's funeral? Who didn't? I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I knew this. It would matter. It would all matter. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother, home from Italy, exhausted but so happy. Lily and Daniel's first dance was magical. I'll send you the video. I stared at the screen, then typed, "Glad you had a good time?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "We'll come by next week to check on you. I'm sure you're feeling better by now." Feeling better. As if grief worked on a timer. As if a week was long enough to erase the image of my son's empty bed. I didn't reply. There are silences that scream louder than words. And that night, mine said everything. The weeks after the wedding felt colorless, a blur of gray mornings and nights that bled into one another. I returned to work not because I was ready, but because the silence at home was unbearable. The halls of the school felt too bright, too alive, but they kept me moving. My students were gentler than before, their whispers softer, their eyes lingering just a little longer, like they knew, like they could feel the ghost following me. The administration had offered to extend my bereavement leave, but I'd refused. I didn't want more days of stillness. I needed the routine, the illusion of purpose, something to fill the hours that used to belong to doctor appointments, medication schedules, and fragile threads of hope. My parents called sometimes, not often. Their voices were careful, polite, the kind of tone you use with someone who might shatter if you speak too loudly. "How are you holding up?" they'd ask before rushing to fill the silence with talk of remodeling projects, vacation plans, or how stunning Lily had looked in the wedding photos. They never mentioned Leo. It was as if he'd never existed, as if saying his name might stain their happiness. And then one day, a text from Lily. "I'm sorry about everything. I hope we can move past this, move past this, move past watching my son die, move past being left alone in a hospital room while my family drank champagne in Tuscany. Move past the fact that they spent nearly $250,000 on flowers, dresses, and wine, while I couldn't buy a heartbeat." I didn't respond. 2 months later, in December, they invited me to Christmas dinner. I almost declined, but curiosity can be cruel. I wanted to see how they looked at themselves in the mirror, how they lived with what they'd done. Their house was immaculate, glowing with garlands and gold light. The 12-foot Christmas tree, professionally decorated like something out of a catalog. The air smelled like butter and money, expensive catering and fine wine. Lily and Daniel were already there when I arrived, sun-kissed from their honeymoon in Bali, their laughter as glossy as their tans. "Nora," my mother gushed, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "I'm so glad you came." "We've missed you," I let her hug me, my arms at my sides. "Thank you for inviting me," I said. Dinner was excessive. Prime rib, lobster tails, side dishes that belonged on a Michelin star menu. My father announced proudly that the wine cost $200 a bottle, like that number meant something noble. They laughed, reminisced, swapped stories about weddings and travel and renovations. I pushed my food around my plate and tried to remember how to breathe. "Nora, you're so quiet," Lily said finally. Her voice dipped in that insincere concern she'd perfected since childhood. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "You know," she continued, glancing at Daniel, "we were thinking maybe you should consider a fresh start. Move somewhere new. Columbus must hold difficult memories." I stared at her, this woman who shared my blood but none of my humanity. "Where would I go?" "I don't know," she said, brightening. "Somewhere cheaper, maybe. Daniel's company has an office in Kansas City. Cost of living's lower. We could help you find something." Help me move away. That's what she meant. Move the discomfort out of sight, sweep the grief off their spotless floors. "I'll think about it," I lied. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been discussing your situation," he said. "You need to consider bankruptcy. It's the responsible thing to do, bankruptcy." "For the medical bills," he said matter-of-factly, "you'll never pay them off on a teacher's salary. Better to just wipe the slate clean, start over, start over." As if Leo's life was a financial misstep to be corrected. A spreadsheet error that could be deleted with the right lawyer. "We could help you find someone good," my mother added. "Your father knows several bankruptcy attorneys." I nodded slowly, the air thick in my lungs, and realized something chilling. They weren't trying to help me heal. They were trying to help themselves forget. The clink of silverware against porcelain stopped the moment I spoke. "You know what would have helped?" I said quietly, setting down my fork. $85,000. 15 months ago, silence rippled across the table. Lily froze, eyes darting to her husband. My mother's practiced smile stiffened mid-expression. My father's voice came sharp, a warning in disguise. "Nora, we've been over this, have we?" I asked. "Because I don't remember there being much of a discussion. You said no, and that was it." He straightened in his chair. "We made a difficult decision based on our financial situation." I gestured around the room, the glittering chandelier, the catered meal, the bottles of wine that could have paid a hospital bill each. "This doesn't look like financial difficulty, neither did the $230,000 wedding." Lily's face flushed crimson. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I stood, my chair scraping across their perfect hardwood floors like a scream. "You spent 3 times what could have saved Leo's life on a party. On flowers and cake and a dress you'll wear once my father rose too," his voice booming. "That's enough. We made the choice we thought was right. We're not going to apologize for supporting your sister's happiness and Leo's life." "What about supporting that life?" I shot back. "He was 8 years old, and you couldn't spare what you wasted on centerpieces." My mother's hands trembled, but her words were steady, almost cold. "He was sick. The doctor said there was no guarantee the treatment would work. We weren't going to throw money at false hope. But you threw twice that much at table linens and champagne towers that ended up in the trash." "Get out," my father snapped. "If you're going to be disrespectful, you can leave." I grabbed my coat. "Don't worry, I'm going." As I reached the door, Lily's voice followed, sharp and brittle. "You're just bitter because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted." "It's not our fault you made bad choices." I stopped, turned. They all stood together, my parents, my sister, her husband, a wall of money and moral superiority. "Bad choices," I repeated, my voice low. "Like trusting family. Like believing blood meant something. Like thinking you'd choose your grandson over a party." Then I walked out, into the cold December night, into silence that felt like freedom. I sat in my car, staring through the window as their laughter returned, muffled and distant. I imagined them settling back into their expensive meal, rewriting the story already. Nora's dramatic again. Nora's ungrateful, Nora's unstable. That night, I drove home through the snow, realizing that grief had finally frozen into resolve. Life went on, not forward, just on. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night forgiveness died, and something colder took its place. I filed for bankruptcy, moved into a smaller apartment, taught, saved, existed. But beneath the grief, something else was growing: purpose. At first, I thought I was just writing to remember the dates, the debts, the words they said. But page by page, it became something else. A record, a blueprint, a quiet declaration that one day I would stop surviving and start settling the score. Then, one gray March morning, an email arrived. The subject line read, "Important Family Matter." I almost deleted it. Spam, I thought. But curiosity can be louder than reason. "Nora, this is your Aunt Margaret. I'm reaching out because I thought you should know. Your father lost his job 3 months ago. He's trying to keep it quiet, but it's serious. His retirement account was entirely invested in company stock, and the company just went bankrupt. They've lost almost everything. The house is in foreclosure. He won't ask for help. He's too proud, but they need it. Please call me if you can. Love, Margaret." I read it 3 times. Then I opened my laptop and started searching. It didn't take long to find the truth. There it was. Headline after headline. My father's company had been exposed in a multi-million-dollar fraud scandal. The CEO was facing federal charges. The firm had collapsed overnight, wiping out jobs, pensions, lives. My father's name appeared in several articles. One of the senior executives who had lost everything. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. After all these years, after they'd built their comfortable lives on the ashes of my son's memory, the empire had fallen. Some would call it karma, others might call it justice. But to me, it felt like something quieter, something purer, recognition. The universe had finally balanced the scales. A week later, my phone lit up. My mother's name. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. She called again the next day, and the day after. I never answered. Then one evening in May, there was a knock on my door. Through the peephole, I saw him, my father. He looked smaller somehow, grayer, thinner. His posture caved in under the weight of something heavier than pride. I opened the door but kept the chain on. "Nora," his voice cracked, "please, we need to talk." "About what? Can I come in?" "No." He flinched but continued. "I know things have been difficult between us. I know we made mistakes, but we're family. We need help." "Help?" I repeated. The word tasted bitter, foreign. "I lost my job. You've probably heard. The house is in foreclosure. Your mother's insurance ran out. She's been having health issues. We've reached out to both our daughters. Lily and Daniel are doing what they can, but they have their own family to support. We thought maybe you could contribute something, even a small amount. A loan, maybe. You could pay it back when your situation improves." I stared at him through the narrow gap of the door. "When my situation improves?" He nodded quickly. "You're a principal now, right? I saw online. You must be doing well. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate." "Desperate," I said softly. "That's interesting." I remember being desperate once his face darkened. "Nora, please. This isn't the time to bring up the past." "Isn't it?" I smiled, and it wasn't kind. "You're asking me for money because you're losing everything." "That sounds familiar." "This is different," he said quickly. "We're your parents." "And Leo," I asked, voice calm and razor-sharp, "was your grandson." Silence, the kind that cuts. Finally, I asked, "How much do you need?" Hope flickered in his eyes, fragile, trembling. "We owe about $90,000 on the house. If we can cover that, we can keep it. But anything would help. 20, 30,000. Just something to buy time." 90,000. More than what could have saved my son's life. Something inside me went still, quiet and final. "I'll think about it," I said. Then I closed the door. Behind the closed door, I leaned against the wall and smiled. Not the kind of smile that comes from joy, but the kind that comes from arrival. 4 years of silence, 4 years of rebuilding, planning, and waiting. And now the moment had finally come. The scales had shifted. The reckoning had arrived. I didn't call them back right away. They could wait. They could sit in the uncertainty. In that sleepless, anxious space I'd once lived in when I was begging them for help. For 2 full weeks I let the silence stretch. Each day I checked the public foreclosure notices like someone reading a serialized story. There it was, the house I grew up in, scheduled for auction in 45 days. In that time, my mother called 17 times, my father 9. Lily sent 3 long texts, carefully crafted speeches about forgiveness, family, and how our parents had always done their best. The irony was almost artistic. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I researched. Their house was worth about $320,000. They owed $90,000. Enough equity to downsize, but not enough to stay comfortable. They'd have to move to a small apartment in a forgettable part of town. My father, a disgraced executive in his 60s, would struggle to find work. My mother would have to learn to live without her clubs, her trips, her weekly salon appointments. It wouldn't kill them, that was the difference. Leo hadn't been given the luxury of survival. They'd live, just not well. On the 15th day, I finally called my father. Nora, his voice cracked with relief. Thank God. I was so worried you wouldn't call. I've been thinking about your request, I said, keeping my tone even. I could almost hear his pulse through the phone, the fragile, greedy hope. We'd like to talk, all of us, I said. You, Mom, and Lily. Of course. When? Where? We can come to you or meet somewhere neutral. My apartment, Saturday, 2 p.m. He exhaled, shaky. We'll be there. Thank you, Nora. You don't know what this means to us. I hung up without replying. Saturday arrived cold and gray. Perfect weather for truth. I spent the morning preparing, arranged 3 chairs in my small living room, placed a folder on the coffee table, neat, organized, precise. Every document printed, every date highlighted, every lie ready to face daylight. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. They entered like ghosts of their former selves. My father looked smaller, his suit hanging off him. My mother's face was deeply lined, her hair streaked with gray. Lily stood slightly behind them, clutching her designer purse like it could protect her from reality. Nora, my mother began, stepping forward as if to hug me. I stepped back. Sit down. They obeyed, huddled together on my worn couch. 3 figures who suddenly looked very much like nervous students in the principal's office, which technically they were. You asked me for $90,000, I began. We know it's a lot, my father said quickly, but we're prepared to offer collateral. A formal loan agreement. We'd pay you back with interest. I tilted my head. How? You have no income? Mom doesn't work. What exactly would you use to pay me back? I'm looking for work, he said, bristling. Something will come through. At 63, I said evenly. With your name attached to a fraud scandal? He flinched. That wasn't my fault. I didn't know what the CEO was doing. Ignorance, I said quietly, is not innocence. Then I picked up the folder. But we're not here to discuss your career failures. We're here to discuss your request for money. Will you help us? My mother asked, her voice fragile. That depends. I opened the folder. I have some questions first. I pulled out the first document. Do you remember this conversation? May 16th, 4 years ago. I came to you and asked for $85,000 for Leo's treatment. My mother's face turned pale. Nora, we've been over this. Have we? I asked. Because I don't think we have. Not really. I held up the printout, my old crowdfunding page. The treatment costs listed clearly, $85,000. You told me you couldn't afford it, I said. That you needed to think about your retirement. That I needed to be realistic. My father's voice went stiff. We made the best decision we could at the time. Did you? I asked softly. Then I pulled out another sheet, a receipt from Lily's wedding planner. Here's the total, $230,000, paid in full, 18 months after you told me you couldn't afford $85,000 to save your grandson's life. Lily shot to her feet. This isn't fair. You're twisting everything. Sit down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut. She sat. I'm not finished. I began laying out the evidence, one sheet at a time, like an executioner sharpening her blades. Venue, 80,000, flowers, 15, catering, 40, dress, 12, photographer, 8, entertainment, 10. Each number fell heavy and deliberate, a nail in the coffin of their excuses. Should I continue? I asked. My father snapped. What do you want from us? What do I want? I echoed, leaning back, feeling every year of silence between us settle like dust. An apology. He exhaled sharply. Fine, we're sorry, we made a mistake. Is that what you want to hear? For years, those words would have broken me. Tonight, they bored me. My mother's voice trembled. We didn't know he was going to die. Yes, you did. My tone was calm, too calm. The doctors told you. I told you. You knew exactly what was at stake, and you didn't care enough to help. I reached for the next paper, not really a document, but a photograph, the one I'd nearly left out because it still gutted me to look at. Leo, in his hospital bed, 2 weeks before he died. This, I said softly, placing it on the table. This is what $85,000 would have saved. Your grandson, remember him? My mother broke first. The sob tore out of her like a wound reopening. Lily looked away, her face tight with shame or anger, maybe both. My father stared at the photo, his expression unreadable, a man trying to calculate the cost of guilt. Nora, please, my mother choked. We know we failed you. We know we should have done more, but we can't change the past. We can only ask for your mercy now, Mercy, I echoed, setting the photo back into the folder with surgical precision. That's funny. I don't remember receiving much mercy when I begged for help, when I sold my furniture, when I maxed out every card, when I lived off ramen noodles so I could buy my son's medication. My father tried again, quieter this time. We didn't understand how bad it was. I met his eyes. Didn't you? I told you multiple times. I showed you the bills, the doctor's reports. I said the words, he will die without treatment. What part of that was unclear? Silence, dense, cracking. But you understood the wedding, I continued. You understood that the floral arrangements had to be perfect, that the cake needed 5 tiers, that your daughter deserved the best money could buy. I sat down across from them, my voice even now almost conversational. Here's what I've learned in the past 4 years. You didn't help Leo because you didn't want to. It was never about money, it was about choice. You had it, and you chose what mattered. That's not true, Lily protested, her cheeks flushed. They were trying to protect their retirement. Were they? I said. Because they spent nearly 3 times that amount on your wedding. Math doesn't lie, Lily. Neither do priorities. My father leaned forward, desperation creeping into his tone. Nora, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But are you really going to punish us now, when we need you most? Are you going to be as cruel as you think we were? I tilted my head slightly. Cruel, I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. Is it cruel to make decisions based on what matters to you? Is it cruel to direct your resources toward your own priorities, not someone else's crisis? Because that's what you taught me. His face went pale. My mother's lips trembled. So you won't help us? She asked finally, voice hollow. I didn't say that, I replied. I reached into the folder again and pulled out a check, $90,000, dated that very day. I laid it gently on the table between us. I'm willing to give you the money, I said. Relief washed over their faces, sudden, desperate, pathetic. However, I continued, there are conditions. Anything, my father said instantly. We'll sign whatever you want. Payment plans, interest, collateral. It's not about payment. The first condition, I said, is that you acknowledge, here and now, that you chose Lily's wedding over Leo's life. That you had the money, that you refused to help. And I want to hear you say it. They froze. Lily turned to her parents. You don't have to do this, she hissed. She's trying to humiliate you. Yes, I said evenly. I am. The same way you humiliated me when I begged at your doorstep, when you told me to be realistic, when I buried my son alone because you had a rehearsal dinner. So yes, I want you to say it out loud, that you made a choice and my child died because of it. My mother's sobs deepened. My father's face turned crimson. Shame, fury, fear. I couldn't tell which. But need always wins over pride. Finally, he spoke. We chose the wedding, he said, voice trembling. We had the money. And we chose to spend it on Lily's wedding instead of Leo's treatment. And, I prompted, he closed his eyes. And he died because we didn't help. I turned to my mother. Your turn. She looked at the photo, tears dripping onto the paper. We should have helped you, she whispered. We should have saved him. We were wrong. Then I faced Lily. And you? I didn't know, she said quickly. I didn't know they refused to help. Didn't you? I asked quietly. You never wondered where all that money came from? You never questioned why I asked to postpone your bachelorette party because Leo was in the hospital and you refused. You never thought it was odd that your wedding took place 3 days after your nephew's funeral. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had no answer. None of them did. Here's the second condition, I said, my voice calm. The kind of calm that makes people nervous. If you take this money, you save your house, and you never contact me again. 3 sets of eyes snapped toward me. No birthday cards, no Christmas gifts, no phone calls. You remove me from your lives completely, the way you removed Leo from your memories. My mother's voice cracked. Nora, you can't mean that. We're family. No, I said, stepping closer, steady and cold. We share DNA. That's not the same thing. I met her tearful eyes. Family shows up. Family sacrifices. Family doesn't let children die while they plan parties. Silence, the kind that hums with humiliation. I walked to the door and opened it. Those are my conditions. Take the check or leave it. You have 60 seconds to decide. They looked at one another, exchanging silent calculations. Pride weighed against desperation. I watched them like a teacher watching students fail a moral exam they'd written for themselves. It took them 43 seconds. My father picked up the check. We accept your conditions, he said, his voice hollow. Good, I replied. There's a document next to it, a formal agreement. It states you'll have no further contact with me. Sign it. They didn't even read it. My father's signature trembled, the ink shaking under the weight of what little dignity he had left. My mother's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the pen. Lily signed with sharp, angry strokes, her face red, her pride bleeding out through her handwriting. When they were done, I gathered the papers, folded them neatly, and handed over the check. You can go now. Nora, my father started, voice cracking. I didn't let him finish. You agreed to the conditions. No contact means no contact. Leave. They filed out silently, my mother sobbing, my father's shoulders bent like the world had finally noticed his sins. Lily stiff and silent beside them. I closed the door, locked it. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to the sound of their footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I walked to my bedroom and opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank account. The $90,000 transfer had gone through that morning. My balance now read $12,000. Years of careful saving, years of restraint. And with one signature, almost all of it gone. But I didn't feel regret. I felt done. And then I got to work. I opened my email and drafted a message to Aunt Teresa, the only person in my family who'd ever shown me an ounce of compassion. I attached a letter I'd written months earlier, a truth that had been waiting for its moment. Aunt Teresa, I wanted you to know what really happened with Leo. The email was simple, cold, factual, impossible to misinterpret. Aunt Teresa, I've attached a complete timeline of events, including every request I made for help and every response I received. You'll also find the expenses Mom and Dad incurred during that same period, particularly regarding Lily's wedding. I thought the family should know the truth. Please share this with anyone who should see it. Love, Nora. I hit send. The document attached wasn't just evidence, it was a reckoning in black and white. Every conversation, every refusal, every receipt, the hospital bills, the photo of Leo in his hospital bed, the Facebook post where my mother called Sophia her first grandchild, the timestamp showing how they attended Lily's rehearsal dinner instead of Leo's funeral reception. It was all there, chronological, undeniable, and irreversible. And I knew exactly what would happen next. My aunt, God bless her gossiping soul, had a vast network. By sunrise, that email would have spread like wildfire to family, friends, church groups, neighbors, and, most deliciously, their country club. By tomorrow, everyone would know. They'd keep their house, yes, but they'd lose something far more precious to them, their reputation. The pristine illusion of generosity, decency, and family pride they'd built brick by deceitful brick. An hour later, a knock came at my door. Lily, alone, angry. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. You signed an agreement, she snapped. No contact. That email you sent, you can't do that. You're ruining their lives. I'm telling the truth, I said evenly. There's a difference. You're vindictive and cruel, she spat. You're destroying them out of spite. No, I said softly. I'm giving them what they gave me. Her jaw clenched. Which is what, exactly? Consequences. The word hung in the air like smoke. They made choices, I continued, and now they get to live with them. Just like I've had to live with watching my son die. They gave you $90,000, she said. They gave me back a fraction of what they stole from Leo, I replied, and only because they had no other choice. If they weren't desperate, would they have helped? We both know the answer. Lily's eyes burned. You're never going to let this go, are you? You're going to hate us forever. I don't hate you, I said. And to my surprise, it was true. Hate requires caring, and I stopped caring the day you chose a party over my son's life. You're not family anymore. You're just strangers who happen to share my last name. Her face twisted. Mom's devastated. Dad's broken. Was it worth it? I met her eyes. Ask Leo if it was worth it. Oh, wait, you can't. Her face crumpled. You really are as heartless as they said. My heart broke 4 years ago, I said quietly. You just didn't notice. You were too busy planning your perfect wedding. And with that, she left. And I closed the door for the final time on my biological family. In the months that followed, I heard things, whispers that floated through the same network that had once protected their image. Their friends stopped calling, The country club quietly didn't renew their membership. Church became too awkward to attend. The house they fought so hard to keep became their prison, walls echoing with guilt instead of laughter. My father eventually found part-time work, stripped of his title and dignity. My mother developed anxiety, started therapy, and told neighbors I was dead. Maybe, in a way, I was. The version of me that once begged, that once forgave, that once believed blood meant loyalty, she no longer existed. As for me, I rebuilt, slowly, quietly. I traveled to the places Leo would have loved and scattered his ashes in the sun, the wind, and the sea. I made real friends. I learned how to live again, for both of us. The $90,000 I gave them was worth it, not because they deserved help, but because it bought me peace. It proved that mercy, when delivered with precision, can be the sharpest form of justice. Some might call it cruelty, but those people never had to bury their child while their family toasted champagne. I didn't destroy them out of spite. I simply handed them the truth and watched them crumble under the weight of it. It didn't bring Leo back, but it finally let me breathe. In the end, revenge wasn't about rage. It was about balance, restoring the scales they'd shattered. They taught me that love was conditional. I taught them that consequences weren't. And as I stepped forward into a life they'd never touch again, carrying Leo's memory like a light in the dark, I realized sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from finally closing the door and never looking back. But some nights I still dream of Leo, running ahead, laughing, unburdened. He never looks back. Maybe that's his way of telling me I shouldn't either. Still, some nights I do. Peace doesn't erase pain. It just teaches you how to live beside it. What would you have done in Nora's place? Would you have forgiven them or given them the truth they deserved? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories where justice comes wrapped in silence and strength, make sure to subscribe. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud, it's just final.